The jungle didn't move. Not a bird, not a breeze, just heat, sweat, and silence. Lying still under layers of camouflage netting, 6 Australian soldiers watched a column of enemy troops walk past, just 10 meters away. 50 Viet Cong fighters, armed, alert, and unaware they were being watched. The Australians didn't move a muscle. No cough, no whisper, not even a breath too loud. Because these weren't regular soldiers. They were ghosts, members of Australia's Special Air Service Regiment, elite reconnaissance units trained to operate deep in enemy territory, to observe, to ambush, to vanish. In Vietnam, they became the shadow warriors. No unit from Australia fought in more dangerous conditions, with fewer men, or in such absolute silence. Their missions were secret, their movements classified. Most of what they did never made the headlines. But the enemy knew, the Viet Cong feared them, because by the time you heard them, it was already too late. From 1966 to 1971, the SASR patrolled the deadliest jungles of Phước Tuy Province. No backup, no fanfare, no glory, just 6-man patrols moving like ghosts, calling in airstrikes, setting claymore traps, and disrupting entire VC operations. One silent kill at a time. This is not the story of battles with helicopters and tanks. This is the story of men who operated where no one else dared, the ones who hunted in the shadows, and made it back to tell the tale. If you believe the hidden war deserves to be remembered, hit that like button and consider subscribing. These are the stories most people never hear, but they should. Let's uncover the untold war of Australia's ghost warriors in Vietnam. The Special Air Service Regiment, or SASR, wasn't just another combat unit. These were men trained to survive alone in hostile territory, gather intelligence, and strike without warning. Their motto said it all: who dares wins. Formed in 1957, modeled after Britain's original SAS, the Australian regiment took elite warfare to a new level. They trained in everything from airborne insertion and jungle survival to sabotage, ambush, and long-range reconnaissance. By the time Australia committed troops to Vietnam, the SASR was already built for the kind of war no one wanted to fight, one with no front lines, no rules, and no second chances. In 1966, the first SASR squadron deployed to Vietnam. They weren't sent to hold ground or take territory. They weren't meant to be seen at all. Their job was to move deep into the jungle, often 10 to 15 kilometers beyond friendly lines, and watch. Observe enemy supply routes, track movements, locate camps, report back, and when the time was right, strike fast, hard, and disappear. They operated in Phước Tuy Province, under the command of the 1st Australian Task Force, 1 ATF. But their missions often took them far beyond, into areas swarming with Viet Cong, North Vietnamese Army, and deadly booby traps. While regular infantry fought in platoons or companies, SASR patrols were just 4 to 6 men. That meant stealth wasn't just an option, it was survival. What made them invaluable was their ability to gather real-time intelligence that saved lives. Many large-scale Australian operations, like Bribie, Coburg, and Coral Balmoral, relied on SAS patrols to scout enemy positions days beforehand. They worked closely with American Special Forces, especially the MACV-SOG teams, often sharing tactics, gear, and missions. But unlike the Americans, the Australians rarely got public attention. Their success was measured in silence. Missions completed, enemies avoided, traps found before they were triggered. The SASR didn't go to Vietnam for glory. They went because they were the best at what they did, and because someone had to go where no one else could. To survive in the jungles of Vietnam as a 4 to 6 man patrol, every move had to be calculated, every breath measured, every step silent. The SASR weren't built to fight toe-to-toe with large enemy forces. They were designed to stalk, observe, and strike only when the advantage was absolute. Their primary weapons weren't rifles or grenades. It was information. They were the eyes and ears of the battlefield, the ones who saw what no one else could. Stealth first, always movement was slow, deliberate, sometimes just 500 meters per hour. Boots were modified for quieter steps. Camouflage was customized for the terrain. Even their sweat was managed, because the smell could give away their position to enemy scouts. Patrol formations were tight and disciplined. They spoke in hand signals. Radios were used only when absolutely necessary. At night, they set listening posts and hideouts so well camouflaged that even friendly units could walk past without noticing them. SASR soldiers trained to lie still for up to 12 hours without moving, concealed under jungle debris, waiting for enemy movement. If they were compromised, extraction wasn't always guaranteed. They had to fight or vanish. Deadly ambush artists. When they did choose to strike, it was precise and brutal. They set claymore mines along trails used by VC patrols. These directional mines would rip through a group of enemies before they even realized anyone was watching. Ambushes were short and devastating, often less than 30 seconds. After the kill, the SAS team would immediately break contact, calling in artillery or airstrikes to cover their retreat. They never lingered. They didn't loot. They left no trail. Tools of the trade. Each soldier carried as little as possible, but everything had a purpose. Weapons, M16 rifles, CAR-15 carbines, SLRS, M60 light machine guns. Special gear, suppressed pistols, claymores, smoke grenades, signal mirrors. Navigation, compass, maps, protractors. GPS didn't exist. Radios, PRC-25s to communicate with aircraft or HQ, always with strict radio discipline. Their packs were minimal. Rations were designed for extended patrols. Water discipline was critical. Each member knew basic medical treatment, demolition, navigation, and fire support coordination. There were no passengers in an SAS patrol, only specialists, airborne insertion and extraction. Most missions began with a silent insertion by helicopter, usually UH-1 Iroquois Hueys. Sometimes they were dropped by rope into remote jungle clearings or onto ridge lines miles from the nearest base. Extraction was even riskier. If compromised, the patrol would call for urgent pickup, often while under fire. Pilots had just seconds to hover, load, and lift off. More than once, the SASR fought to the skids of the chopper. They weren't out there to win hearts and minds. They weren't out there to take ground. They were there to hunt shadows, gather intelligence, and eliminate threats before anyone else even knew they were there. They were Australia's ghost warriors, and this is how they fought. From 1966 to 1971, the Australian SASR operated in some of the most dangerous terrain in the Vietnam War, and they did it almost entirely unseen. Their main area of operations was Phước Tuy Province, the same region where the first Australian task force was based at Nui Dat. But the SAS weren't tied to fixed positions or perimeters. Their job was to go far beyond the wire, deep into enemy territory, where conventional units rarely dared to venture. And they did it with only 4 to 6 men at a time. The province was a nightmare of dense jungle, bamboo thickets, and winding tracks used by Viet Cong guerrillas and North Vietnamese regulars. SAS teams were inserted into these zones to identify enemy routes, camps, and weapon caches without ever being seen. They focused especially on VC supply lines, watching them for days before striking or calling in fire missions. One area, known as the Long Green, became legendary among SAS patrols. Its maze of trails and natural concealment made it a hub for enemy movement and the perfect hunting ground for Australia's elite. Another hot spot was the Long High Hills, a rugged terrain filled with caves and hidden bunkers. It was also the operating base of D445 VC Battalion, one of the most dangerous enemy units in the region. The Long Highs were known for their brutal terrain, frequent ambushes, and a terrifying amount of booby traps, hence the nickname, the Mine Factory. SAS teams were often sent in to observe enemy activity there ahead of major Australian operations. They mapped trails, estimated troop numbers, and sometimes guided artillery fire or airstrikes from the shadows. While the terrain changed, their core missions remained focused and brutal. Reconnaissance and surveillance. Primary task, observe and report. Days spent in OPS, observation posts, watching VC patrols, supply movements, or base locations. Intelligence gathered was used to plan future conventional assaults. Ambushes, fast, violent engagements set up along known enemy trails. Claymore mines and overlapping fire zones allowed a 4-man team to destroy a larger VC patrol in seconds. immediately followed by withdrawal and possible air support. Target designation and fire coordination. SS patrols could call in artillery and airstrikes with extreme accuracy. They often acted as spotters for air assets, guiding bombs or rockets onto hidden enemy positions. Tracking. Some patrols followed VC footsteps for hours or even days, using broken brush, footprints, or discarded equipment to stay on their trail and set up an ambush. Beyond the wire, beyond the rules. Though they were Australian-led, SAS patrols sometimes worked with American MACV-SOG units, especially in reconnaissance missions near the Cambodian border. These missions were highly classified and occasionally crossed into neutral territory. Officially, Australians weren't supposed to operate outside their assigned province. But in Vietnam, the lines on the map didn't always matter. The SASR weren't just operating behind enemy lines. They were operating beyond what most soldiers even thought possible. And with each mission, they got better, faster, more lethal, more invisible. They didn't need large numbers. They needed silence and patience. For most Australian troops in Vietnam, combat was loud and chaotic. Ambushes, mortars, firefights. But for the SASR, battle was something else entirely. It was about silence, timing, and striking from the dark with surgical precision. These weren't firefights fought in numbers. They were chess matches, with lives on the line. Mission 1. The ambush at Long Green. It was late afternoon when the 6-man patrol took position on a narrow jungle trail in the Long Green, a stretch of dense forest favored by VC couriers and patrol units. They set claymore mines in a perfect arc, each one loaded with 700 steel ball bearings. Then they waited. Hours passed. Heat faded. Mosquitoes buzzed. Then, movement. A VC patrol, 6 men strong, walked straight into the kill zone. The lead soldier passed the final trip marker. The patrol commander whispered, "Fire!" Boom! 2 claymores exploded in perfect sequence. The first 3 enemy soldiers were obliterated. The others scattered. The SAS opened fire for just 7 seconds, dropped 2 more enemies, then melted into the jungle. They were extracted within 20 minutes. No friendly casualties. Mission success. Mission 2. 10 days in the Long High Hills. Not all missions ended in gunfire. A team inserted by helicopter into the Long High Hills, an area crawling with VC units and fortified bunkers. Their task? Observe, report, and call in support. They moved just 300 meters a day, sleeping in spider holes, burying waste, and covering every trace of movement. They spotted an enemy battalion-sized camp camouflaged beneath the canopy. For 8 days, they tracked movement, counted soldiers, and mapped bunkers. On day 10, they called in a coordinated airstrike and artillery barrage. The jungle erupted, fire and steel tearing through VC positions. Afterward, ground units moved in and found dozens of dead fighters and destroyed infrastructure, all made possible by 6 silent Australians, lying in wait with binoculars, maps, and a radio. Mission 3, contact with D445 VC Battalion. Not every mission went smoothly. During a surveillance patrol near Phuoc Tuy, a SAS team encountered unexpected movement. A D445 battalion patrol was closer than anticipated. The team went prone, camouflaged under foliage. But the enemy moved toward them. Too close, too fast. Then a crack. Someone had stepped on dry bamboo. The jungle erupted with AK fire. The patrol returned fire immediately, suppressing the enemy long enough to call for urgent extraction. Within 15 minutes, a Huey roared in low, dodging incoming rounds. The team popped red smoke, sprinted from cover under fire, and leapt aboard as the door gunners raked the jungle. One SAS soldier took shrapnel to the leg, but they all made it out. It was chaotic, close, and nearly fatal. Neutralized enemy units before they could launch attacks. Expose VC supply chains, allowing artillery and air power to strike with precision. For conventional Australian infantry, the SASR were the eyes in the dark. The reason they could move through hostile zones with a fighting chance. But their legacy didn't stop in Vietnam. The experience forged in that jungle would shape Australia's modern special forces doctrine for decades. Tactics, training, and selection processes used by today's SAS operators still trace their roots back to Vietnam. And when the War on Terror came decades later, in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, it was the SASR veterans of Vietnam who trained the next generation. They passed on more than knowledge. They passed on a mindset: don't be seen, don't be heard. But when the time comes, act with overwhelming precision. Their story was almost forgotten, but their impact, permanent. They didn't just change how Australia fought. They helped define what it means to be truly elite. The Vietnam War is often remembered for its politics, its protests, and its tragedies. But behind all of that were warriors who fought in silence. The men of the Australian SASR didn't seek fame. They didn't ask for glory. They asked for a mission, and they completed it every single time. They operated alone. They watched unseen. And when the moment came, they struck with speed and fury, then disappeared into the jungle. They were never supposed to be noticed. But now it's time we remember them. So to the ghost warriors who patrolled where others wouldn't go, this story is for you. And to those who never came home, we honor you. Thank you for watching. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, please consider giving this video a like, leaving a comment, and hitting subscribe. It helps us bring forgotten history back to life. This was the hidden war of the Australian SAS in Vietnam. We'll see you next time for another story that history almost erased. Until then, stay sharp, stay curious, and never forget. Neutralized enemy units before they could launch attacks. Expose VC supply chains, allowing artillery and air power to strike with precision. For conventional Australian infantry, the SASR were the eyes in the dark. The reason they could move through hostile zones with a fighting chance. But their legacy didn't stop in Vietnam. The experience forged in that jungle would shape Australia's modern special forces doctrine for decades. Tactics, training, and selection processes used by today's SAS operators still trace their roots back to Vietnam. And when the War on Terror came decades later, in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, it was the SASR veterans of Vietnam who trained the next generation. They passed on more than knowledge. They passed on a mindset: don't be seen, don't be heard. But when the time comes, act with overwhelming precision. Their story was almost forgotten, but their impact, permanent. They didn't just change how Australia fought. They helped define what it means to be truly elite. The Vietnam War is often remembered for its politics, its protests, and its tragedies. But behind all of that were warriors who fought in silence. The men of the Australian SASR didn't seek fame. They didn't ask for glory. They asked for a mission, and they completed it every single time. They operated alone. They watched unseen. And when the moment came, they struck with speed and fury, then disappeared into the jungle. They were never supposed to be noticed. But now it's time we remember them. So to the ghost warriors who patrolled where others wouldn't go, this story is for you. And to those who never came home, we honor you. Thank you for watching. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, please consider giving this video a like, leaving a comment, and hitting subscribe. It helps us bring forgotten history back to life. This was the hidden war of the Australian SAS in Vietnam. We'll see you next time for another story that history almost erased. Until then, stay sharp, stay curious, and never forget.